Here's a question that'll mess with your head. What if everything you think is random isn't? What if the coincidences in your life, the chance encounters, the sudden opportunities, the bizarre timing of things aren't accidents at all, but responses? Science is only now starting to understand. Stay with me. In 1961, a physicist named Eugene Wigner proposed something that made his colleagues deeply uncomfortable. He said that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it creates it, not metaphorically, literally. He argued that the equations of quantum mechanics only work if consciousness plays an active role in collapsing possibilities into actual events. His peers thought he'd lost it. But then the experiments started backing him up. And here's what nobody talks about. If consciousness affects reality at the quantum level, the level where everything is built, then the line between thoughts and things starts to blur in ways that should fundamentally change how you live your life. But it doesn't, because we've been taught to dismiss this, to call it pseudoscience, wishful thinking, manifestation nonsense. Except, what if the people dismissing it are the ones who've been sold a story that benefits from you believing you're powerless? I'm going to show you 3 things in this video that will make you question everything you think you know about how reality works. Not spiritual platitudes, not motivational fluff, but documented, peer-reviewed, replicated evidence that the boundary between your mind and the world outside it is way thinner than you've been led to believe. And by the end, you're going to have to make a choice. Keep living like you're a passive observer in a mechanical universe, or start acting like you're an active participant in a responsive one. Let's start with the one that broke my brain. Washington, D.C., 1993. The city's drowning in violence, homicides at an all-time high, politicians screaming about law and order, police overwhelmed, the classic American crime crisis. Then a group shows up with the most absurd proposal imaginable. They say, "Give us 8 weeks, we'll bring 4,000 people to meditate in your city. We won't change any laws, we won't talk to any criminals. We won't do anything except sit quietly and focus our attention, and violent crime will drop by 20%. The police chief laughs in their faces. He tells reporters, and I quote, "It would take a foot of snow in June to reduce crime by 20%. But here's the thing, these people aren't spiritual hippies making vague promises. They're serious researchers. They bring in an independent scientific review board, criminologists, statisticians, skeptics. They pre-register their hypothesis with exact numbers. They agree to use FBI uniform crime statistics data they can't manipulate. In other words, they set up a trap for themselves. If they're wrong, it'll be obvious to everyone. The experiment begins, June 7th. A few hundred meditators arrive. Crime continues rising. The skeptics are already writing their "I told you so" articles. But then more meditators show up. 1,000, 2,000. By late July, they hit 4,000, and the crime rate drops. Not a little, not in a, well, maybe there's something there kind of way. It collapses. Violent crime falls 23.3% below the predicted level. The statistical probability this happened by chance, less than 1 in 50 million. The independent board confirms it. The methodology holds up. The effect is real. And then, silence. No headlines, no policy changes. The study gets published in an academic journal 6 years later, and the world moves on like it never happened. Why? Because this study doesn't just challenge scientific materialism, it nukes it. If 4,000 people sitting quietly can affect crime rates across an entire city, not through any physical intervention, but through focused consciousness alone, then we're not living in the reality we think we are. We're living in something closer to a multiplayer video game, where the physics responds to the player's collective mental state. And that idea? That's too dangerous for institutions built on the assumption that you're powerless. But let's go deeper. Because the DC study isn't an outlier. It's part of a pattern that shows up everywhere once you know where to look. Let me tell you about a part of your brain you've probably never heard of, but that controls more of your life than you realize. It's called the reticular activating system, the RAS for short. This tiny network of neurons at the base of your brainstem acts like a filter. Every second, your senses are bombarded with about 11 million bits of information, visual data, sounds, sensations, smells. Your conscious mind can process maybe 40 of those bits. So the RAS decides what gets through. And here's the wild part. It prioritizes information based on what you've told it is important. Not consciously, unconsciously, through your beliefs, your focus, your emotional patterns. You know that thing where you decide you want a red car, and suddenly you see red cars everywhere? That's not coincidence. That's your RAS adjusting its filter to show you what matches your focus. But it goes way beyond cars. Your RAS doesn't just filter what you notice, it filters what opportunities you recognize, what information you absorb, what people you connect with, what ideas occur to you. Two people can walk into the same room. One sees nothing useful. The other sees 3 potential business partners, a solution to a problem they've been stuck on, and an idea that changes their career. Same room, different RAS programming, different reality. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Your RAS is programmed by what you repeatedly focus on with emotional intensity, not what you casually think about, what you believe at a visceral level. This is why manifestation fails for most people. They're trying to reprogram their RAS with affirmations they don't actually believe. Their conscious mind says, "I'm abundant," while their RAS is tuned to scarcity because that's what they've been emotionally rehearsing their entire life. You can't trick your RAS. It responds to authentic belief, to identity, to the story you actually tell yourself when nobody's watching. But when you do shift that, when you genuinely reprogram what your RAS prioritizes, reality doesn't change. Your access to reality changes. Opportunities that were always there become visible. Patterns you couldn't see become obvious. Connections that seemed impossible start happening naturally. It's not magic, it's neuroscience. But neuroscience alone doesn't explain the next part. Let's talk about the double slit experiment, because if you actually understand what this experiment shows, it'll rewire how you see everything. You take a single photon, a particle of light, and shoot it at a barrier with 2 slits. On the other side, you have a detector screen. The question is, which slit does the photon go through? When you don't measure it, when you just let the photon do its thing, it behaves like a wave. It goes through both slits simultaneously and creates an interference pattern on the detector. This is quantum superposition. The photon exists in multiple states at once. But the moment you measure which slit it goes through, the moment you observe it, the wave function collapses. The photon chooses one slit. It behaves like a particle. The interference pattern disappears. The act of observation changes the outcome. Not because observation disturbs the experiment, but because observation determines reality at the quantum level. This isn't philosophy. This is repeatable, verified physics. Niels Bohr one of the founders of quantum mechanics, said it explicitly: everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. Translation: reality, at its most fundamental level, exists as probabilities until consciousness collapses it into actuality. Now, most scientists will tell you this only applies to subatomic particles, that it has no bearing on everyday life, that the quantum world and the macro world operate by different rules. But that's a convenient firewall, because if consciousness affects matter at the quantum level, and quantum mechanics is the foundation of all matter, then there's no logical reason to assume consciousness stops affecting things just because they get bigger. And in fact, there's evidence it doesn't stop. In the 1970s, physicist Helmut Schmidt conducted experiments with radioactive decay, a purely random quantum process. He had human subjects try to mentally influence the decay rate. Over millions of trials, he found statistically significant deviations from randomness that correlated with the subject's intentions. The odds against chance? Billions to 1. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences later conducted meta-analyses of over 1,000 such experiments spanning decades. His conclusion: human intention affects quantum systems with statistical certainty. But here's where it gets really weird. In some experiments, the random events were recorded before the human subjects tried to influence them. The data was stored, unobserved. Then, later, sometimes weeks later, participants focused their intention on the recorded data, and the data changed. Not literally, but the statistical distribution shifted in ways that matched the participants' intentions, as if consciousness could reach backward through time and affect events that had already occurred. This violates everything we think we know about causality, but it's consistent with quantum mechanics, which allows for retrocausality under certain conditions. So let me ask you this. If consciousness can affect quantum processes in the present and the past, what makes you think it can't affect the probability of future events? What makes you think your beliefs, your focus, your emotional state aren't constantly collapsing probability waves in your favor or against it? We treat the placebo effect like it's a nuisance, a confounding variable in medical research, something to control for and eliminate. But what if the placebo effect is the most important discovery in medical science, and we've been systematically ignoring it because it's too inconvenient? Here's what we know. In randomized controlled trials, placebos, fake treatments with no active ingredients, regularly produce dramatic healing effects. Joint pain disappears, depression lifts, Parkinson's symptoms improve. Not always, not for everyone, but consistently enough that pharmaceutical companies have a serious problem. Their drugs often barely outperform placebos. Except the effects go way beyond what psychology should explain. In placebo surgeries, where patients are cut open, then stitched back up without any actual procedure being performed, patients report the same pain relief and functional improvement as those who received real surgery. Arthroscopic knee surgery, spinal fusion, angina treatment, the placebo surgeries work. This isn't endorphins. This is belief restructuring biology. Dr. Bruce Moseley conducted a study on arthroscopic knee surgery. He divided patients into 3 groups. One received real surgery, one received partial surgery, one received fake surgery, where he just made incisions and pretended to operate. All 3 groups improved equally. Patients who received the fake surgery reported reduced pain and improved function for years afterward. They believed they'd been healed, and their bodies responded as if they had been. Or consider the study by Dr. Fabrizio Benedetti on Parkinson's patients. He gave them a placebo they believed was medication. Their brain activity changed immediately. Dopamine flooded the regions affected by Parkinson's, not because of chemistry, because of belief. Then there's the nocebo effect, the dark twin of placebo. When people believe something will harm them, it does. In clinical trials, patients given placebos who are told about potential side effects experience those side effects at significant rates. Headaches, nausea, fatigue. Not because the placebo contains anything harmful, but because expectation shapes biology. So here's the question nobody wants to ask. If belief can heal chronic pain, improve Parkinson's symptoms, and even kill you, what else can it do? What if your beliefs about your capabilities, your worth, your potential aren't just affecting your psychology, but are actively programming your biology and influencing the probability field around you? What if manifestation isn't separate from medicine? It's the mechanism medicine has been accidentally proving for decades. May 6th, 1954. Roger Bannister runs a mile in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. For decades, the 4-minute mile had been considered a physiological impossibility. Sports scientists said the human body couldn't do it. Doctors warned that attempting it would cause heart failure, lung collapse, bone fractures. It wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. Until it wasn't. Here's the part that should make you reconsider everything. 46 days after Bannister broke the barrier, Australian runner John Landy also broke it. Within 3 years, 16 more runners had done it. Today, over 1,400 runners have broken the 4-minute mile. The current record is 3 minutes, 43 seconds. So what changed? Did human anatomy suddenly evolve? Did training methods radically improve overnight? Did the laws of physics shift? No. What changed was belief, the story we told ourselves about what was possible. Bannister didn't just run fast, he shattered a collective limiting belief. And once that belief cracked, everyone who had been held back by it suddenly broke through. This pattern shows up everywhere. Before 1947, no one had broken the sound barrier in an aircraft. Pilots who got close experienced violent shaking, disorientation, control failures. Scientists called it a sound barrier because they believed it was a physical wall. Chuck Yeager proved it wasn't. And immediately after, breaking the sound barrier became routine. Before the Fosbury flop, every high jumper used the straddle technique, the world record plateaued. Then Dick Fosbury introduced a backward technique that looked ridiculous. Experts mocked it. He won Olympic gold. Within 10 years, virtually every elite high jumper switched to his method, and records exploded upward. Before the first iPhone, touchscreen smartphones were considered impractical. After the iPhone, every phone company suddenly figured out how to make them work. This isn't about technology improving. It's about collective consciousness shifting, about limiting beliefs dissolving. And here's the most important part. The limitation was never out there in physical reality. It was in here, in the shared story we told ourselves about what was real and possible. When that story changes, reality follows. Not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. Because the story determines what you try, what you notice, how you interpret failure, how you respond to obstacles, who you become in the process. And who you become determines what becomes possible. Let's talk about something you experience every single day, but probably never think about. The algorithm. You open Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Within seconds, you're seeing content that feels eerily relevant to your life. You were just thinking about learning guitar, and suddenly your feed is full of guitar tutorials. You mentioned a vacation to a friend, and now you're getting ads for flights. The standard explanation: the algorithm is tracking your behavior, your searches, your clicks, your watch time. It builds a profile and serves you content that matches. That's true, but it's incomplete. Because here's what researchers in machine learning are starting to notice. Recommendation algorithms don't just respond to your past behavior, they shape your future behavior. They create feedback loops that amplify whatever you focus on. You watch one video about productivity, the algorithm shows you 10 more. You click on a few. Now your entire feed is productivity content. 6 months later, you've consumed hundreds of hours of productivity videos. You've restructured your morning routine. You've changed your identity around being a productive person. The algorithm didn't just reflect who you were, it participated in creating who you became. And you participated too. By choosing what to watch, what to skip, what to engage with, you trained the algorithm to train you. This is a microcosm of how manifestation works in the bigger picture. Reality is an algorithm, not a digital one, a probabilistic one. It tracks your focus, your beliefs, your emotional patterns, your identity, and it serves you experiences that match. You focus on scarcity, it shows you evidence of scarcity. You focus on opportunity, it highlights opportunities. You identify as someone who struggles, it amplifies struggle. You identify as someone things work out for, it finds paths that work out. Not perfectly, not instantly, not magically, but over time, the pattern becomes undeniable. The algorithm doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care about your excuses. It just responds to signal, to what you consistently feed it. And just like with social media, most people are feeding it trash, fear, resentment, victimhood, scarcity, and then wonder why their feed looks so dark. Here's the thing about algorithms though. They can be hacked, not by tricking them, but by understanding how they work and feeding them better signal. You can't fool the algorithm, but you can reprogram it. And the moment you start doing that intentionally, the moment you start curating your focus, your beliefs, your emotional diet like you'd curate your content feed, reality starts serving you different results. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. If manifestation is real, why doesn't everyone who tries it become rich, healthy, and successful? Why do some people seem to manifest effortlessly while others struggle for years with no results? This is where most manifestation content fails you, because they sell it like it's a vending machine. Think the right thoughts, visualize the right images, say the right affirmations, and reality spits out what you ordered. But consciousness doesn't work like that. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're trying to steer a massive cargo ship. You're standing at the wheel, turning it with all your might, and nothing happens. The ship keeps going in the same direction. Does that mean the wheel doesn't work? No. It means the ship has momentum. It means there's current and wind pushing against you. It means there might be other people on the ship trying to steer in different directions. And most importantly, it means turning the wheel right now doesn't change the direction right now. It changes the direction over the next mile, the next 10 miles. This is manifestation. Your conscious intention is real. It has real influence. But you're not the only force in the system. You've got decades of subconscious programming steering against you. Trauma, limiting beliefs you inherited from your parents, cultural conditioning, fear patterns etched into your nervous system. You've got other people's expectations and energy affecting the probability field. You've got the momentum of your past choices. You've got physical constraints and timing you can't control. Manifestation isn't about overriding all of that with positive thinking. It's about aligning all the forces, conscious, subconscious, behavioral, emotional, in the same direction. This is why visualization alone doesn't work. Because while your conscious mind is imagining success, your subconscious is screaming, "We're not safe enough for that. We're not worthy of that. People like us don't get that." And your subconscious controls 95% of your behavior. So you sabotage, you procrastinate, you make decisions that confirm your limiting beliefs. Not consciously, automatically. The people who successfully manifest aren't just thinking different thoughts. They're doing deep psychological work. They're healing trauma. They're reprogramming their nervous system. They're transforming their identity from the ground up. They're not trying to manifest from their current self. They're manifesting by becoming a different self. A self for whom the desired outcome is natural, obvious, inevitable. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. That process takes time. It takes patience. It takes confronting the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. There's no shortcut, but the shortcut is also not necessary. Because the transformation itself is the point. Who you become in the process is more valuable than what you get at the end. Here's something that's going to sound woo-woo until you look at the data. You're not just manifesting as an individual, you're embedded in a collective field of consciousness that's also manifesting. And sometimes, that field is working against you. Remember the Global Consciousness Project I mentioned earlier? The random number generators detecting deviations during major world events? That project has been running since 1998, with 70 locations worldwide continuously recording data. And what they've found is that when mass attention focuses on something, especially something emotionally charged, the collective field becomes coherent. The random number generators synchronize in ways that should be statistically impossible. 9/11, Princess Diana's funeral, the Indian Ocean tsunami, Obama's inauguration, major global meditations. Over and over, the pattern shows up. But here's what's haunting. The coherence often appears before the event. Before the first plane hit the towers on 9/11, the RNGs started showing massive deviations from randomness, as if millions of people knew something was coming at a level beneath conscious awareness, as if the collective field was responding to a future event. This suggests that consciousness isn't bound by linear time the way we assume, that we're connected to each other and to events in ways that violate our everyday understanding of causality. And if that's true, if we're all swimming in a shared field of consciousness, then what we believe collectively shapes what becomes probable collectively. Think about that. When a culture collectively believes in scarcity, scarcity becomes more probable. When a society collectively expects conflict, conflict becomes more likely. When millions of people resign themselves to powerlessness, systems of control become stronger. Not because of some mystical force, but because collective belief shapes collective behavior, which shapes collective outcomes, which feeds back into collective belief. It's a self-reinforcing loop, but it works in the other direction too. Cultural renaissances don't happen randomly. They happen when a critical mass of people simultaneously believe that change is possible. When artists, thinkers, builders align around a new vision of what could be. The 1960s civil rights movement, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Arab Spring, these weren't just political shifts. They were consciousness shifts that reached a tipping point, and suddenly the impossible became inevitable. Malcolm Gladwell calls it the tipping point. Rupert Sheldrake calls it morphic resonance. Quantum physicists call it entanglement. But whatever you call it, the implication is clear. You're not just manifesting your personal reality. You're participating in the manifestation of collective reality. And every time you shift your own consciousness, every time you choose possibility over resignation, abundance over scarcity, power over victimhood, you're not just changing your life. You're adding signal to the collective field that changes the probability distribution for everyone. This is why meditation studies show crime reductions, why Bannister's breakthrough helped thousands of other runners, why cultural shifts seem to happen all at once. We're more connected than we think, and our individual choices ripple out in ways we can't measure but can definitely feel. Let me tell you the real reason most people don't manifest what they want. It's not because they don't believe enough. It's not because they're not visualizing correctly. It's not because the universe is against them. It's because they haven't given themselves permission. Permission to want what they want without guilt. Permission to believe they're worthy of it. Permission to take up space. Permission to outgrow the people around them. Permission to become someone their family doesn't recognize. This is the invisible barrier nobody talks about. You can do all the visualization in the world, but if part of you believes that success would make you a bad person, or that money would corrupt you, or that being happy while others suffer is selfish, that part will sabotage every opportunity. Your subconscious is designed to keep you safe. And for most people, safe means consistent with your identity and your tribe. If your identity is someone who struggles but has integrity, then success is a threat to your identity. If your tribe is people who complain about the system, then thriving is a betrayal of your tribe. So your subconscious protects you by making you anxious when opportunities arise, by making you self-sabotage right before a breakthrough, by keeping you stuck in patterns that feel terrible but familiar. This is why lottery winners often end up broke within a few years. Not because money is cursed, but because they didn't give themselves permission to be wealthy at an identity level. Their subconscious still identified them as not that kind of person, so it orchestrated their return to the familiar state. The same pattern plays out with health, relationships, success in any domain. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you believe you're allowed to have. And most of us are operating with permission structures we inherited from people who were traumatized, scared, and limited by their own circumstances. Your parents' beliefs about money, your culture's beliefs about success, your religion's beliefs about pleasure, your peer group's beliefs about ambition. You absorbed all of it before you could consent. And now it's running in the background, determining what you allow yourself to pursue, what you notice, what risks you take, what you believe is possible for someone like you. The work of manifestation, real manifestation, is updating your permission structure. It's asking, what am I not allowing myself to want? What would I do if I knew I deserved it? What would change if I gave myself full permission to become who I'm capable of being? And then doing the inner work to actually grant that permission, to grieve the identity you have to let go of, to separate your worth from your history, to forgive yourself for wanting more than you were told you should have. This is psychological work, trauma work, shadow work. It's not glamorous. It's not a quick fix. But it's the difference between people who manifest consistently and people who stay stuck despite trying every technique. Alright, here's the uncomfortable truth about manifestation that nobody wants to say out loud. It's not just about getting what you want, It's about becoming someone you might not recognize. Because the version of you who achieves the thing you want, the relationship, the income, the body, the lifestyle, is not the current you with better circumstances. It's a fundamentally different person. Different beliefs, different habits, different emotional baseline, different identity, different nervous system. And getting from here to there requires letting parts of yourself die. The part that bonds with others through complaining. The part that gets attention through struggle. The part that feels morally superior by staying small. The part that avoids responsibility by blaming external circumstances. These parts served you. They kept you safe in environments where being big or successful or different was dangerous. But now they're keeping you stuck. And manifestation doesn't work by adding new thoughts on top of old programming. It works by pulling out the roots of the old programming and planting something new, which means you have to be willing to grieve. Grieve the community that won't understand your growth. Grieve the identity that kept you comfortable. Grieve the version of yourself you've been loyal to, even though it's been killing you. This is why people self-sabotage right before a breakthrough. Not because they're broken, but because growth requires loss. And loss hurts, even when what you're losing is pain. Your subconscious would rather keep you in familiar pain than risk unfamiliar uncertainty. So it creates drama. It manifests obstacles. It finds reasons to retreat back to the known. And here's the really tricky part. Manifestation works on everything. Not just what you consciously want, but what you unconsciously fear, expect, and believe. If part of you expects abandonment, you'll manifest relationships that confirm it. If part of you believes you have to struggle, you'll manifest circumstances that require it. If part of you is addicted to chaos, you'll keep creating it. Manifestation isn't a tool you use to get what you want. It's a mirror showing you who you actually are beneath the stories you tell yourself. And the only way to change what you manifest is to change who you are. Not superficially, not cosmetically, but at the level of belief, identity, and nervous system. Which brings me to the most important thing I can tell you. So here's where we are. You now know that consciousness affects quantum systems. That collective intention reduces crime. That belief restructures biology through the placebo effect. That breaking collective limiting beliefs changes what's physically possible. That your attention programs reality's algorithm to serve you matching experiences. You know that manifestation isn't magic, it's the natural consequence of consciousness transformation. But knowing isn't enough. Because the real question isn't, is manifestation real? The real question is, am I willing to do what it actually takes? Are you willing to confront the parts of yourself that are scared of success? Are you willing to outgrow relationships that keep you small? Are you willing to update beliefs you've carried since childhood? Are you willing to become someone your current self doesn't recognize? Because that's the work. Not vision boards, not affirmations, not wishful thinking. Deep, uncomfortable, transformative work on your identity, your trauma, your permission structures, your nervous system. The people who successfully manifest aren't lucky. They're not blessed. They're not special. They just did the work everyone else is avoiding. And then, almost as a side effect, reality rearranged itself to match. Not because they forced it, because they aligned with it. Here's what I want you to take from this. You are not a passive observer in a mechanical universe. You are an active participant in a responsive one. Your beliefs aren't just thoughts floating in your head, they're instructions you're giving to your brain, your body, and the probability field around you about what to filter, what to prioritize, what to create. The question isn't whether manifestation is real. The question is, what are you currently manifesting by default? And is it what you actually want? Because here's the final twist. You're already manifesting. You've been manifesting your entire life. Your current circumstances are the manifestation of your past beliefs, focus, identity, and nervous system patterns. Which means you already know how to do this. You're just doing it unconsciously, on autopilot, with outdated programming. The work now is making it conscious, intentional, aligned with who you want to become rather than who you've been. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's hard. It requires confronting things you've been avoiding. It demands a level of honesty with yourself that most people never reach. But it's also the only path to a life that feels truly yours. So ask yourself, what would I do if I knew reality was responsive? What would I pursue if I believed my focus mattered? Who would I become if I stopped waiting for permission? And then start living like the answers are true. Not because I told you manifestation is real, but because you're willing to test it, to experiment, to become your own evidence. Reality is an open question. Your life is the experiment, and you're both the scientist and the subject. So run the experiment. See what happens when you act like consciousness matters. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that the only thing standing between you and the life you want is the belief that you're not already powerful enough to create it. You've always been powerful enough. You just forgot. Now remember. If this video changed how you see reality, subscribe, like, and drop a comment with one belief you're ready to let go of. And if you want more content that bridges science, psychology, and consciousness, subscribe, because we're just getting started. See you in the next one.